Hey guys, I just want to review the Q3 for a minute because we never got to do that because we didn't come back from spring break. But if we were to get one of these, first caution I have is to not depend on bringing notes into the room with you. You've only got 40 minutes to write an essay, so you really need to come in ready to go. If you wanted to jot down a couple themes on a piece of paper, universal ones that you think would apply to multiple books that we've read, you could definitely do that. I wouldn't try to bring in like plot summary or anything like that because I think it'll just take you too long to read it rather than just depending on what you know. I do think you should probably go back and read a couple of the books, but moving on, I think the most key aspect to the Q3, as I've said in class several times, is making sure that you carefully annotate the prompt. So when you look at this one, just to refresh you on a couple things, I always said it's not okay to quote the quote. That's boring. And just because Nepal says that he believed mischief starts because there's an ideal view of the world, that doesn't mean that's the only thing you can write about. So that's just a leaping off point, like a attention grabber to try to get you thinking about how an ideal view of the world could go wrong. So don't feel limited to that. So again, not every class period did this. So if your class did not do this, hit pause right now and annotate the prompt really fast. If your class did do this, if you need to reread it, I would hit pause and reread it and write down a couple things. So when you go ahead and read it, what you'll notice is it says to make sure that you choose a character, a singular character who has an ideal view of the world, and then write an essay in which you analyze the idealism and its positive or, circle the word, or negative consequence. So you could choose a character who just simply has a positive view of the world, and that would be Orlando, for example. I don't really think he has a negative view of the world. It sometimes does has negative consequences, but don't feel like you have to tie into that. And then it says, explain how the positive portrayalist idealism illuminates the meaning of the work as a whole. So this one explicitly does ask you to write about the whole work and how that idealism reflects on the society outside of that individual. Sometimes the prompts don't directly ask that, but just because it doesn't ask that doesn't mean you should not do it. Now, moving on, you'll see that there's a list of works here. Don't bother reading it. It's wasting your time. Just choose one that you know well that would fit this task. And like I said, if your plan is to choose one from last year, please make sure that you reread that book. Don't try to write about something that you haven't read for months. And that would include something from our class. The reason you have those books all year is so that you can refer back to them. So the biggest concern that you guys have expressed to me or that I've heard from you is that you don't feel like you understand the border between assertion, support, and commentary. So what I want to do now is pull up some samples from the College Board and look at how those individual samples work to clarify that balance and to show you the explicit amount of detail that you need to get a higher level response. Now the problem here is that some of you haven't read these books, but I think in a way that works in your favor because you can see that if the speaker gives you enough detail, it can actually help even you understand their point, even though you haven't read the book. And that's kind of your goal. You're not explaining the plot, but you're just citing enough evidence so that your argument seems proven to that individual. And if we go back to the idea that I told you, like a theme is always something that's arguable, that you could agree or disagree. And if you notice, I try to do that a lot in class. I try to give you guys ones that maybe not everybody bought into at first, to see how you'd feel about it. And I think that worked pretty well to show you what a theme is. So keeping that in mind, that someone could argue against you, that's why you need so much evidence. Now, this is sample TT. If you will take a second, hit pause, and read through this, I'd like for you to try to score it based on the 3 dimensions that we've been through. Okay, now that you've had a chance to look at it, I'd like to draw your attention to paragraph 2. Did you notice that when he or she begins talking about their abstraction, the idealism, they said that they would one day aid in the advance of humanity, but they never quite clarified exactly how that would be. They just jump into to arguing that the main character believes that certain people are better off dead. They never really clarify why that would be positive. So they're already starting to lose a little bit of the commentary points. And when you get down to the bottom, if you keep looking at the amount of detail that the character's given, you'll see that it starts to seem almost summary-esque, and there's very little analysis mixed in with it. And if we skip down to the 5th paragraph, um, the author of the novel illuminates the idealism of the characters in many ways, creating an idea in which actions need to be taken by those who are strong-willed and can stomach it. Action throughout the plot creates both doubt and hope for the character and his ideals. After committing the deed, the character's world shifted, believing he was chosen, to being mere sheep. Once that realization set in, it was the moment where the character was able to demonstrate the true effects. It doesn't really go into why it shifted, what his thought process was for shifting, why emotionally that no longer was important to him. It just sort of keeps generically referring back to idealism. So if you go back and you look at this one in the schema, you'll see that it was a 2 because it comes across largely as just a very generic view of why idealism's bad and no specific plot details. So again, if you'd like to read more of the commentary on that particular essay, you can hit pause here and read through that detail. So moving on to another essay, go ahead and hit pause here and read through the essay. And when you come back to this essay, what's kind of different or unique about this essay is the level of commentary in it. It is rather good, and it's very similar to a lot of what you guys are doing. If you read paragraph 2, it does identify the idealism, and it talks about the idealism being based on the idea that California is a haven of jobs and prosperity. And it gives you a rhetorical question, misguided, but it does answer the rhetorical question, which is really the only way you should be using them, if you use them at all, which, as you know, I don't really like. And if you look down, it's really interesting. It says their ideal view of California is what inspired their perseverance through breakdowns, unemployments, violence, discrimination, and death. Had they given up on their ideal view of California, they would have never have gotten jobs and the ability to better their family's prospects. By consistently hold that view, the Jodes ensured that they will never give up on securing a better future, so dangerous in some cases, an ideal view of the world ensured their survival. Their idealism is not just a plot piece, it illuminates the meaning of the work as a whole, which I always hate when you guys write that, but by portraying the plight of migrant farmers during the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, he was writing a novel telling an individual's stories, but that of the displaced migrant farmers. As you can see, this is a very sophisticated argument because it gets into how the criticism of society is layered into the novel, but it's still stuck at the 3 on the commentary level because of that list of things up there. They had breakdowns, unemployments, violence, discrimination, and death. There's no plot detail to support those assertions. If they had slowed down and explained those, when did they experience an episode of discrimination? How did they push through it? Whose death? Like, who died? What? Like, that's what you would need to get a 4. So let me show you a 4. If you would like to go ahead and reread any of these, please feel that you can go back on to College Board and see these. Here is, the breakdown of the ones that we looked at just now. That was FF, which is a 131. So that was a very unique essay in that it got the thesis statement and the sophistication point, but in the commentary section it only got the 3. So you can see they did give you one in a minute that gets a 4, which is the M. We're probably not going to have time to look at that one in this little video because I'm limited to 15 minutes. But I also suggest you go back and look at the M, because what I did want to do is show you the J or the DD so that we could look at those. So I did decide to go ahead and show you this Lord of the Flies one because I know that a lot of you read that as freshmen. I would be very careful about using Lord of the Flies on this exam because typically they only score about a 4. But this student scored a 5 because of the amount of societal critique he put in it. And again, like I said, that's something College Board likes. If you look at the first paragraph, and immediately starts analyzing by saying Ralph holds an idealistic view of the world. It's dangerous, and while temporary success can be achieved, it ultimately leads to the destruction of government institutions and chaos. He encourages a reader to adopt a more realistic view of the world and recognize the inherent evil in all people. So you immediately get the recognition that a character is used by an author. You get the recognition that it's used to critique society as a whole, and you get a really clear universal thesis where it doesn't just say Ralph believes that people are inherently evil. It says all people are. So if you look at the second paragraph and you read through it, so hit pause right now and read through that paragraph. After you've read it, you can see how much specific detail he puts in it. Piggy and Ralph find a conch, and Ralph calls together the group. He instructs the group to build a signal fire. He instructs the kids to do this. And then if you keep looking down the essay, what you'll see is that he continues to show how Ralph's plot or how Ralph's realization comes about using really specific details. Like look at paragraph 4. It is only near the end of the novel when the worst consequences of Ralph's naivete are in broad display. At this point, Ralph has let virtually all the kids who've intended to run to join Jack, who promises to provide food to the kids and laughs at the prospects of maintaining a signal fire. Jack, who demonizes members of his government with physical violence, symbolically embodies a dictator, indicating that Ralph's idealistic direct democracy collapses with the will of the dictatorship. Furthermore, one of Jack's sadistic companions named Rogers rolls a boulder off a cliff, killing both Piggy, Ralph's best friend, and shattering a conch into a million pieces. The death of Piggy shows the demise of the good Piggy in the face of the evil Roger, while shattering the conch shows completely the dissolution of Ralph's democracy on the island. I mean, look at that level of detail. And I know some of you right now are asking, Ms. Rourke, my gosh, I'm never going to remember that detail. How would I remember that? You remember by studying your review sheets, and you remember most of all by writing, 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 and rereading. That's why we only read 4 to 5 books, because I was expecting that if I spent a lot of time on them, hopefully you would remember the details. And now that we maybe have a month before we can actually take this exam, it's going to require you guys going back and rereading at least 2 of the books that we did. You could definitely consider doing the As Are Watching God and writing about that. And if you'd like, we can do a class chat on that. But I do want to encourage you to please go back and take a highlighter with these essays and try to highlight where you see the assertion and the commentary. So I'll probably try to do another video on that tomorrow, and I will probably try to do the other Q2 that if you didn't do this one, you'll get a chance to look at the one that the other class period did. I hope this helped. I hope it wasn't too fast. Again, for some reason, every website seems to give me only a certain amount of time to do things. So have a good day. Plus, you don't want to listen to me more than this anyway, right? Okay, see you soon. Bye.